Here we go. Now I have the honor of introducing you to Sarai Waters, genuinely one of my favorite humans on the planet that I have the pleasure of knowing. Sarai is just dope, doing incredible things. A multi-hyphenated creator and a multifaceted, what was the second piece? Storyteller,
Storyteller.
multifaceted storyteller. Hyphens for days, facets for days, literally doing all of the things all of the time. Sarai, good to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Justin. It's good to be
Yeah,
here.
so pumped. So pumped. All right. So I want to hear your background story about how you got to where you are doing. Like, you're starting a new podcast right now. You've been winning awards for podcasts. We're going to be talking about some of the work that you've done there, creative on a ton of different fronts. How did you get here? Because I know you've had a beautiful journey up to this point.
Yeah. So I've pretty much been creative all my life. Um, I've been writing short stories since middle school and writing poetry for myself probably around the same time. Um, I just pretty much use it as an escape. And along with athletics, I did cross country and track pretty much all of my life. I started running since I was maybe 8 years old. Carried that all the way through, even beyond college. I was training professionally as a track athlete until I injured my psoas, which is the muscle located underneath your abdomen and it connects all the way down to the inside of your thigh. Yeah, that's a nasty muscle to tear.
Yeah, you
Um,
don't want to do that.
yeah, and I tore it.
Yeah.
And it was during that rehab process that I was like, okay, maybe I could come back from this. I did not. I
Mhm.
literally woke up one day and I had a dream where prior to this, my teammates would always ask me, "So, Sarai, you gonna stop running one day? You know, like when you gonna stop?" And I was like, "I'm gonna stop running when God says stop running." And I
Mhm.
literally woke up from a dream where God was like, "Okay, time to stop running."
Wow.
And I went to practice, and it wasn't the same. Like my passion for it was gone. My love for it was just diminished, and it broke my heart. That was my first true heartbreak.
Wow.
Um, and around that time, I felt to go to grad school, which was also something that I had thought not to do because I wanted to go immediately. But
Mhm.
God allowed me that gap year to pretty much start training professionally, which is something I've always wanted to do. So I'm really grateful for that grace period. Um, but yeah, fast forward, um, getting to grad school was also a faith journey. After I accepted that that's where I was going for film, um, had no real way of getting there.
Wow.
I had
So you
my mom.
got in but couldn't had no way to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
That's
I got
dope.
in and
Yeah.
had no real way to get there. My mom had recently lost her job, so she didn't really have the funds to get us there. But we had friends who were like, "No, we got the plane ticket. We're gonna get you there."
Wow.
They even gave us money for a taxi to get to
Wow.
the school because
Right.
LA
That's the level we're talking
is
about right now.
crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I operate on crazy faith. Just as a disclaimer,
Mm.
I'm not a normal person. I'm okay with that. My life
No,
has not
that's
been
perfectly
normal.
good.
My life has not been normal. Um,
Right.
and even when I got there, I enrolled the same day that I got there. Um, and we were pretty much homeless for 20 days because my FAFSA had not kicked in.
Wow.
And so it was it was a time. It was
What
a
a
time.
wild journey.
Um, Neither of us were very happy about it.
Yeah.
But as the process went along, it got easier. It's just like, okay. But God would still send people to be like, oh, I'm just going to randomly bless you with hotel stays for tonight. And not just a night, but like 3, 4 days. And
Right.
we're
A little
like,
bit of stability.
okay.
Just yeah.
Mind you, we didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to beg for anybody. Like, if people knew, they knew. If they
Oh,
helped, they
hold
decided
on.
to
I'm
just
getting
help their
some
own
feedback
volition.
here. I'm not sure if that's on my.
Can you hear me?
Oops. Okay, there we go. It stopped. Whatever it was, it stopped. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So we never asked for any help, but people were always offering. And I was like, all right, thank you, God. that was truly the beginning of, I would say, my real walk with God, outside of the church, just getting to know
Mhm.
God literally in the wild.
Right.
Um, and so went to grad school, got my master's degree in film, graduated, moved back to the East Coast, and felt like I really wasn't going to be able to do anything with that degree. And for the longest time, I didn't. But, um, oh my goodness, I'm skipping over things.
No,
I'm just,
this is great.
I'm
No,
sorry.
life is not linear, and the story doesn't have to be linear either.
Yeah. So I completely missed the fact that we went to San Francisco for a little bit. I was in San Francisco for a year. And it was during my time that it actually inspired my podcast episode with the Shelter in Place podcast. Um, I was homeless in San Francisco, but this time it was much better. I knew it was temporary. When you
Mm.
go into things knowing, A, it's temporary because before it was temporary. So that means I had a precedent in my mind. I was like, all right, God, I don't know how long I'm going to be on these streets, but you got me.
Wow.
And you did. We were
Wow.
good. We had food stamps. They had hot food. Um, towards the end of my homeless journey, I was finally able to stay in a young adult shelter, build some community out there, really got to learn about myself, got involved in the creative community. I went to open mics, rekindled my love for poetry, started writing poetry again, um, wrote about what I knew.
Mm.
And my friend who was there with me, she was a publisher, and she was like, "You know what? We're gonna publish our poetry." And I was like, "No, we are not." And she was like, "Yes, we are." And I said, "You know what? If I'm going through it, I might as well capitalize off of it. It's the American way."
Right. Wow.
Oh my goodness. And whenever I tell people that I have a published book of poetry, they're like, "So did you set out to write a published book of poetry?" And I was like, "No, I did not set out to publish my pain. No,
Wow.
that was not my
Mm.
intent."
That's deep.
And they would try to chastise me for it and be like, "Well, shouldn't you do it intentionally?" It's like everything doesn't happen intentionally. Some things just turn out great, even after you've gone through some shit.
Right. Right.
And yeah, I have a published book of poetry.
Wow.
And
I think
uh,
that's so telling. And some of the greatest creators that I know create to create, not
mhm,
create to blah, 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 final product, whatever that
right,
thing is. Because I think sometimes if we get caught up on what the final product has to look like, then we're creating for the market. We're not creating from here. I was reading a post recently by Childish Gambino, and he's like, yeah, I'm not a celebrity. And people are like, what are you talking about? You're of course you're a celebrity. You have, he's like, no, no, no. Because a celebrity means that I'm doing it for the likes, for the this, the this. He's like, I create, I don't give a shit what anybody.
mhm,
Like I'm creating from here. And the fact that it lands and the fact that I've built community around it is amazing. But he's like, but if all of that went away, I'd still be creating because I'm
right,
a creator. I create for the art. And so I love that that's how your book emerged. And I know that a lot of our listeners can resonate with that as they're going through things like the pressure to create for the masses rather than creating from within. So I
mhm.
love that. And that was part of your journey. Keep going.
Yes. And honestly, I think that's why it's so hard for me right now in this process of creating a podcast because I feel like it's more so for others, but it's I guess it's a shared experience. Like I'm creating this podcast for myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I'm also doing it because I want to serve others. I want to inspire them with what I've been through, and not just
Yes.
what I've been through, but I'm interviewing other people who have either been through similar situations or are also creatives. I want to
Mm-hmm.
just bring light to their stories. And so that's a lot of pressure. Um, but I got involved in podcasting in November 2020. Um, I was writing for a blog, and she wanted me to get some podcasting experience, and she knew that Laura. Laura Joyce Davis from the Shelter in Place podcast. She was working on an apprenticeship for podcasters. And I was like, okay, sure, I will definitely learn how to podcast. Um, One of the greatest experiences of my life. It was wonderful. It was great. Um, Beautiful women, beautiful hearts, beautiful creatives, super encouraging. The feedback was amazing. They are still a source of life for me today. Just last week, we actually had a panel with pod people that spoke about the award winning episode that I was on. It was actually an
Mm.
episode that I was interviewed for, where I spoke about my homeless journey.
Mm.
We won the International Women's Podcast Award, the SURE Award.
Come on.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, okay, this is getting some traction.
Wow.
If you guys want to see that, it's episode 24 from season 2, and a front to Zeus.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, that was my first time being on the other side of production. I'm used to being in the background, and so being in the forefront is not my sweet spot. But it's
I
gratifying.
want
I
to camp
felt
out
being pushed
there.
a lot. Mhm.
Right. I want to camp out there for a minute for the incredible people in our listeners here on LinkedIn and whoever listens to this beyond. I know that's going to resonate with a lot of people who are used to being in the background, or people that are more comfortable being in the background, but are now feeling like they have more to give, and or feeling called to lead or be out front in some other
Mhm.
ways, and not necessarily for them, but because they have something else to bring to the world. Would you spend some time speaking to those people? Because I think that is such a real and relatable struggle. And I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit more as you are emerging now. You are like emerging your art to the foreground because it's needed, like almost like the world is calling it out of you. And so I'd want to hear what your experience has been with that process.
It is an internal struggle for me. Um, I'm an introvert in every sense of the word. I go out in people, and then I come home and I recharge. And sometimes I write about it. um, and oh, it's just so different and outside of my nature, I would say, because I'm used to being the observer, you know. As a poet, I take what I see and I write it. And the biggest audience that I share with is a room full of people who might record it and put it on, their Instagram feed. Especially like if it's something that actually knows me, or if it's something that I'm saying is resonating with them. But I'm not really thinking about where it's going. I'm not thinking about what they really have to say about it because I wrote it, I love it, and I just wanted to share it with y'all. And
Mhm.
I think if I were to take that attitude and apply it to this podcast, it would be so much further along than it is right now because I'm really the one that's holding myself back right now
Mhm.
because being in the spotlight startles me so much. Um, I know that all my life I've been called to bigger, I've been called to greater, and my fear has not been what if I fail. My fear has always been what if I succeed. Like,
Ah,
do I really have the capacity to carry the success that God is calling me to? And everything that I've been through, all the character building trials that I've been through, all the lives that I've touched, being unknown still today, I'm like, all right, I know I have to do this. Um, and we really just have to get to a point where we stand firm and know not everything is for us. We
mm.
don't always go through things just for ourselves, you know? Um, we're not alone in what we're going through. Sometimes it takes time to find a community who can encourage you and uplift you and remind you of who you are. Because
Yeah.
sometimes they see things that you don't see. And it's really about being truthful to yourself and just not straying from that authenticity. People love that. Like we don't. I don't have. I don't have time for anything fake. Anything that's not in alignment with where I'm trying to go, what I'm trying to be, what I'm trying to do. Um, so really, sometimes you just have to have a self-talk and be like, all right, boo, we done came this far. We're not giving up now. So what you gonna do? You gonna do it, or you gonna sit back and let somebody else do it and be like, oh damn, I just did that.
Right.
No, I'm not gonna
Well,
do
and
that.
even on that point, I would even argue that no one can do it like
Mhm.
you. Like there is a unique flavor that you bring to the world that nobody, like someone could do something similar and you're like, oh damn, that I had that idea or I had whatever, but nobody can do it like you do it.
Right.
And so there is no, if you don't bring it to the world, you don't create what's in your heart to create, you just end up dying with that song unsung. Like that
Mhm.
song just gets buried with the people who didn't have the courage to pursue it or didn't have the community to pursue it. I feel like you raised a great point when you talked about being in community and people seeing things beyond what you see for yourself. I was on a webinar yesterday with Odell Bizel. Shout out to Odell. He's here on LinkedIn doing some beautiful work in the speaking community, public speaking, bringing people together. And he was just talking a lot about you cannot grow sufficiently outside of community. Like
Mhm.
you can't get beyond yourself unless you're beyond yourself. Like
Right.
that is the only way, which means that we are built for this community and built to grow and thrive there. The other piece that I really got out of what you were saying was the authenticity and feeling like when you're called to these bigger stages and you're called to these bigger platforms, a lot of times people feel the pressure to change who they are to try to meet the stage or try to meet the platform. But the
Mhm.
platform is just the platform, So when I was hearing you and I was just getting this image of you staying exactly who you are, authentic, introverted, like you don't have to change any of that. You still get to bring that exactly how you are to whatever stage it is and forget about what everybody's going to think because people are going to resonate it with exactly that, like that energy, that sauce. Like people are going to really resonate with somebody who's not on a stage trying to be on a stage, trying to be whatever, something they're not. And so I'm just really encouraged by your authenticity and the way you're approaching this work and the way you're building this podcast. Want to give a shout out to Monica here on the live. Monica is saying that's where I'm in my life right now. Want to be up front, but always prefer to be in the background because it was safe.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that for the people that are like just on the brink, being called to that next step, but it feels comfortable back there? How would you encourage somebody to take even the next little steps? What do you think those are?
Mhm. Oh goodness. So I don't I don't know too much about little steps.
Okay.
What
Okay, then
I
let's talk big.
I usually get a little nudge, and then I get a push, and that's just me. I can't
Mhm.
speak to anybody else, but when I feel called to do something, and I'm actually clear on what it is, because sometimes it's just like you don't know what it is that you're supposed to be doing. You don't know where your direction is, like where your focus is
Right.
supposed to be directed. But when you finally get that direction, it's like, all right, so how long are you gonna sit back on it?
Mm.
And then God's like, all right, now I got to just come in and shake up some shit because you didn't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
do it the
yeah.
first time when I gently nudged you.
Right.
Um, I hope that's not the case for you,
Yeah.
but that's how God works with me,
Right, right.
and that's mostly because I asked for it.
Mm.
Um, because I can be stubborn. There are certain things that I just jump on immediately, but like stuff like this where I'm actually in the spotlight, I'm like, you sure you want me to do this?
Mm.
You sure? And in those cases, um, it's best to have accountability. Like if you're really trying to do something, talk to somebody around you. Make sure you tell them you are my accountability partner, which means that you are checking in on me on weekly progress and how I'm doing with this.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so key. Great, super practical. And then I think the one that I would add for me that's been helpful that might resonate with somebody is the more I get my eyes off of myself and onto the people that I know are going to benefit from this. And I've shared this story, Sarai, we've talked about this, and I've shared this story on the show a bit before about my book writing process before, and how what really broke through my fear and my doubts of putting this out to the world was I just got this picture of like one person who needed this, like there was something in there that was going to radically transform their life, or they were waiting on this, or like depressed until they got this thing. And that was the fuel for me, is like getting off of looking straight in front of my own face and like, oh, how's it going to look when it's out and blah 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 blah. It's like getting my eyes onto the person I'm actually wanting to help, or one person who might benefit from hearing your story or whatever it is, because then it's not about you. And then I think that's what infused me with courage, because it's like courage is beyond fear. It's not in spite of, it's not like getting rid of fear. It is beyond fear. And I think, that was a part of my journey. So I want to hear now, let's go practically on the podcast side, because I know there are a lot of people who are trying to figure out, they feel like they have something to say. They know that podcasting might be a platform that they're interested in exploring. What do you think? What are the steps? How do people actually go from having a voice, having a story, having a concept, to bringing it to the world as a podcast specifically in that format? Break that down for us.
Okay, so there are different types of podcasts that you can do. You have to look at what is the format that you're bringing your information forward. You can either create a narrative, which is like a scripted podcast. So you're basically writing down all of your thoughts before you go on. And maybe you're interviewing somebody, and even if you do interview somebody, you're including those quotes, those audio clips, interspersed and interwoven with what it is that you have written. So you're creating a narrative of a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Mm-hmm.
There are interviews where you're literally just recording what it is that you're taking from this interview with the person, and then you're directly uploading it and you're distributing that to the people.
That's what we're doing right now on LinkedIn Live. This is an interview with Sarai Waters.
Yay. And I'm sure there are other types that I haven't necessarily explored, but I plan on exploring a whole bunch of them because monotony tends to bore me sometimes, and I just want to change it up and see how it goes.
Right. So you're saying like kind of step one is pick your format. Like how are you going to deliver? Yeah, that
step
makes
one,
sense.
pick your format. And I really wouldn't worry so much about the equipment. I literally have a $5 five and below microphone.
Woo!
That works wonderfully.
That's awesome.
Wonderfully.
That's awesome.
Audio is crisp and clear. And as you go further in your journey, you make more money. If you want to update it, do that.
Right.
You don't?
Well, let's pause right there, because I literally just had a conversation with one of my business coaching clients yesterday, and they're like, "Yeah, so I think I might need a new computer, so that I can like, they're in the process of starting their business, so that I can I'm like, well, what can't your computer do that you need it to do? And they're like, well, I really think that when people get into this mode of like, okay, I need the perfect mic and I need the perfect camera and before I start, I really think it is like societally approved procrastination. I'm calling people out right now. Like, you are just not wanting to put the product out. You are not wanting to like really get your voice out for most people. Like, you don't need all of that to get started. You need to get started. And then you can go and get the things. Then you can go and do the stuff. But most people are just sitting on their passion because they have a really good excuse of like, well, I don't have the right mic. Can't do it. It's not, it's like, no, your voice doesn't need the right mic in order for it to be out there. It's like, it needs to be out there. So I'm calling out the people who like are really good at having great approved like procrastination excuses that are really just like, nah, let's call it what it is. You're afraid, which is okay. but like, let's call it what it is. It's not about the fucking mic. Oops, it's not about the mic.
See, with podcasting, you could also use your headphones. Not these. I'm not talking about AirPods. I'm talking about the microphone with the actual cord attached with the little microphone that you hold up and you make sure it's like,
Oh yeah,
hello,
those
this
cute
is
little
my
ones.
podcasting voice. Um, there are workarounds. They can't see you. They have no idea what equipment you're using. As long as it sounds good, that's really all that matters.
Right.
You also need to make sure that you're doing research as to what platform your audio is living on, because what people may not know is that even though you see podcasts available for streaming on Spotify and Apple Music and other sources, their podcast doesn't live there. It's just where it's streamed. Your podcast
Okay.
lives
Break this
on
down for us. Where does
it
the
lives on
podcast
like
live?
on right now my podcast where I've selected for it to live when I go live with it, it'll be on Buzzsprout, which is free. It's completely free. Your podcast, you literally just upload the audio and it's there. So you enter your title of your podcast, and even if you don't have one right off the bat, you can still create a profile without that. You can always change it later. You enter a description because you want to make sure that people can find you wherever you're at. You upload the podcast, and then I haven't gotten beyond that, so I can't really tell you how everything connects to Spotify and Apple yet. But I would say in about 6 months, Justin and I should have another interview, and I can give you all the updated details on that
Right.
plan.
I was gonna say 6 months ain't gonna. That's too long. That's too long. I'm not playing with you, Sarai. You got too
I
much
know.
to give. Nah, 6 months. What? Like for what? No. So okay. So but I'm tracking on this that the audio has to live somewhere.
It
and
has
then
to live somewhere.
And then it gets pushed to the places.
Mm-hmm.
But the places aren't really storing the audio. They're just like hosting it.
Exactly. They're hosting it. They don't own it.
Okay, I'm tracking. That's beautifully said. All right, so you have this, and I think there's like a couple other ones like Anchor. There's a few ones that put.
You can actually put podcasts on WordPress now.
Wow, and it can store right there. That's really cool. All right, so you have your format. You got it. You got the idea for what you're gonna want to do. You get guests, or you do your own if you're just doing kind of personal narrative style. You record it with simple technology. You don't need all the fancy stuff, right? And then you find somewhere to host it and push it out to these platforms. And then from there, I'm curious about the distribution of the podcast, right? Because now it's like you have something and it's out, but how do people actually find out about it? How are you getting the medicine to the people?
All right. So for beginners, I would definitely say start with what you know, which would be social media. You can either promote it on your own personal Instagram page, Facebook, Twitter, or create a specific page for the podcast. What I would do is I would start promoting it on my personal one, and then eventually, I would have my business page created, and then push on my personal page, pushing people to go see it there,
right,
and follow you, get a gathering. And as you get more professional and more invested in what it is that you're doing, you're going to want to start looking into becoming your own producer, basically. You're looking at radio shows, you're looking at online streaming services. You're sending out emails, you're basically digital marketing. You're figuring out who your audience is, and you're going to where they're at. So you're listening to other podcasts. You're seeing if you can host them, or if they want to host one of your episodes, because you can actually share episodes, and that way you get a cross following. So you're just gathering momentum.
I love that. That makes so much sense to me. And really what it sounds like you're talking about when it comes to the distribution side is you're really building a community. Like you are starting to gather people around a common idea or around a shared experience, which I think is so beautiful and so needed in this era. So I want, for the people that are sitting here and know that they have something to say and are on the brink of like, hey, I know I want to start a podcast, when it comes to like gathering the ideas and organizing the thoughts around this, where does somebody start? Because it can feel really overwhelming, like podcasts and this, like when I published my book, like, oh, I'm going to be an author. It has like these attached connotations to it. Break it down really simply for somebody who is like just beginning. Like, where do they really start in terms of organizing the ideas around what this thing can be?
I would start with a Google Doc or
Yeah.
a spreadsheet, you know, something where you can start brainstorming. Um, and if you want to take it even simpler, get a sheet of paper and do the web and just branch out. See all the different ways that you could potentially go with your idea. Write it all down. Um, and make sure it's something that you can see yourself talking about long term if you do
Yeah.
want to commit to a specific vein in podcasting, because podcasting can be very niche. So you want to make sure that this is what you really want to do, because you're going to be talking about it for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you set the precedent that I'm going to talk about whatever I want, however I want, because this is
Right.
that type of
Which is
podcast.
also a valid format,
Exactly. This
right?
is your show. You're the host. You get to
Yes.
decide what type of stories you want to tell. You just have to be consistent. You know, set up a date and time where you release your things. Be consistent, and people will rock with you because they're like,
Yeah.
you know what, this is great content. She's coming out on the second Tuesday of every month. I'm gonna be there.
Right.
Podcasts are for the car. They're for walks. They're for cooking. Um, they're just great. You know.
Right. Yeah, and just talk about what you're passionate about. I also love the way you were talking about, okay, it's coming out on every second Tuesday. That's a way of using the community as your accountability, right? Because it's like, no, I know that I got to have something out to my people, because even if it's like my mom who's waiting
Right.
on it, you know, hey, she's waiting every second Tuesday, Justin, like, what's going on here? You know, so I think you can leverage that by putting out a date. I know for me, that's worked really well when it's come to like starting businesses or creative endeavors, is like putting something out there as something that I'm publicly accountable for, and then really trying to reach it. But I do think it helps in that. So that's great advice. All right. So now what's next for your podcast? Where are we at? Where's it going? Because and also, by the way, listeners, like the idea here is Sarai is an award-winning podcast who is now starting her own and coming to the forefront, getting out of the shadows and into the light, with bringing your beautiful work forward. And I wanted people to hear and capture this moment in your journey as you're starting, as you're doing, like, no, I've done this with other people, I've learned this type of stuff, but now I'm doing it as my own thing. I want to capture this moment in the journey, as you're starting out, and show people this is not just people who've like already done it all the way and now we're bringing them on because they're all like, no, these are real people doing real things, taking really bold steps, courageous steps to live the life that you know you're on the planet to live. So I want people to hear that as the context for what you're about to say now, which is, where are you at? Give us the real journey, so that when we interview you in 3 months and this thing is out there and doing all the things, that's what I want to know.
So currently, so the current format of my podcast, or the premise behind it, is basically I am sharing stories. I love telling stories. Poetry are stories to me. And the main stories that I'll be telling revolve around either the homeless community, people who are close to homeless, which looks like couch surfing. It looks like staying in your cousin's bedroom for 3 months. It also looks like staying with your parents, you know, temporarily, unless, you know, that is your permanent living situation. But basically, it's for people who are put in situations that they didn't necessarily see themselves in about however long ago this happened, because your life can change just that quick.
Right. That's so good.
And so with my episode for the Shelter in Place podcast, what I did was I started it with a poem about homelessness, what the experience was like for me. And so I decided to carry that forward. I have done my first interview with my first guest. And gathering information from what he told me, I created a poem based off of that. And so
Wow,
every episode, regardless of the format, I'm starting it with a poem because I have
that's
to include my
so
poetry. I
dope.
haven't found an open mic night in I don't know how long, and I'm like, I gotta write. I've got to do it. I've got to speak it. If not for anybody else, for me, because I need
Yeah.
an outlet. And so, really, the poetry is for me, and the narrative story is for everybody else.
Mm.
Um, but yes, that is what I'm working on right now. I'm just trying to figure out whether I want it to be an interview format or whether I want to take the time and narrate the story and really craft the story around our interview.
Hmm.
That's where I'm at right now,
I
and
love that
really,
so much.
it's really just
One of,
about the
one of
amount of
the
work that I
formats,
want to do.
right, right. One of the formats that I've heard recently that sounds fun, and it sounds like you have the skill set to consider this anyway, is the like you've done an interview and then you're grabbing it and like narrating and then putting the like responses or the clips from the guest.
Mhm.
Malcolm Gladwell's podcast does this really well, where he'll come on and narrate a little bit and say, like, give a bit of context, and then put in clips
Mm.
of interview and clips of things where you're hearing from the actual guest. But he frames it really, really, really well. So his revisionist history, maybe something like that, is a really good. And I think you have the skill set to pull it off. Not everybody does. I think
I'm
you
gonna look
could
them up.
yeah, I think you could really pull off that style for this. It's a bit more production, a bit more like post production on the other side, but I think it'll really make a beautiful, beautiful product. And then you're hosting
Okay.
it where? Let's talk practically, right? Where are you hosting this again?
I'm hosting it on Buzzsprout.
What's
It's
it
free.
called?
Buzzsprout.
Buzzsprout. Okay, post it
Mhm.
on Buzzsprout, and then you're going to be pushing it to all the things, and then you're going to be on your personal Instagram and Twitter and all those things, using that to promote the interviews and that type of stuff. Are you
Correct.
trying to really want to get practical? Are you trying to have a few episodes done before you go out, or are you trying to like release this one and then like what's the rhythm that you're trying to create around this work?
So the rhythm that I'm trying to create after this first episode is I want to have multiple episodes done. What I really want to do is get this first episode out and be like, yes, I have an episode. I'm doing this. I'm no longer procrastinating. So they have an expectation. So I'm
Yeah.
creating an expectation and then going forward, I will have multiple episodes done because I don't ever want to be in this position again where I don't have another episode lined up and ready to go or
Hmm.
ready for post production. But also, I want to speak about post production. You need to make sure that you have an audio editing service that you are familiar with or are going to get familiar with because they are not cheap. They're
Hmm.
about $200, but they're worth it. Some audio editing services are a bit more intuitive than others. I prefer Hindenburg.
Hindenburg,
Um,
okay.
Hindenburg,
Hindenburg, okay.
yeah, it's quite intuitive. I mean, I don't mind Logic Pro, but I'd actually have to go on YouTube and really do some digging around, some research to figure out all the toggles and the shortcuts for the keys.
Hmm.
And I don't know if I want to give that type of energy to that. So I'm going to stick with Hindenburg because it's more intuitive. And if there's something that I'm missing, I wouldn't mind looking that up because I already have a grasp for what it is that I'm doing. But yeah, start with what you know,
Yeah.
do
And then
more
there are
research.
also, I can say there are also great people around who specialize in audio editing where you could like go and get an episode edited for, $50 or something like that as you're getting
Exactly.
started out. So there are ways to do it. But yeah, if you're on a really tight budget and doing it yourself, yeah, you're gonna have to learn that. And that to me is the beauty of the journey is who you become on the way. That's
Hmm.
the beauty of life. That's the beauty of like to me business.
Testing. Hello. Oh my. Uh-oh. I don't know what happened to Justin. I don't know if I'm still here and if anybody can hear me. Um, hmm. Well, is anyone still here? Okay, okay. Oh no. Well, thank you guys for being here. I'm really not sure if and or how he can come back. Um, I guess in the meantime, if y'all want to ask me any direct questions in the chat, I can stay on for an extra 5 minutes or so and see if anything happens. Wait till I hear back from him.
Oh, maybe we're back. Maybe we're
Yeah,
back. I don't know. Just some internet connectivity issues.
mm-hmm.
It's the risk, the risk of going live on the internet. All good. So yeah, I was talking about who you become on the journey as you do the things and what you learn along the way. I'm excited for what you have coming out. What is the timeline? When can we publicly expect episode number 1 to be available on the things? Because we are going to hold you accountable because we love you.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I knew you were gonna ask me that. Okay. Realistically, next month because the end of the month is here.
Mm-hmm.
It is here. Yeah, I would say by the 20th.
Okay. By the 20th of May.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we're looking forward to this first episode. I'm really, really stoked on the format that you have with the poetry and weaving those pieces in. I think that's beautiful. And to all the listeners here, you have something to say. Please get it out into the world. Do not let whatever's holding you back hold you back any longer. Make it simple if you have to. And for me, I can say interview style has been really helpful for me as I got started out because it allows me to show up and not have to be the smartest person in the room. I get to bring on brilliant people who are doing brilliant things in the world and have them share from their heart. And I just get to ask good questions and learn myself. And so if you're just starting out, interview style, I think can be a really great way of engaging and having some beautiful content to put out to the world. What other piece of advice would you give to somebody who's starting out here, right? Like what else would you give as they're getting going?
Hmm. Let me think about that. And I want to respond to somebody in the chat that said, "I figure I can just do it and stop being scared." You don't stop being scared. You just do it in the midst of it because it just gets easier. I would say because you get stronger and you get more confident in what it is that you're doing. You know, as you continue to do something, it's kind of like you're building muscle memory, so you get more um, capable, I would say. You know, you start to pick up the jargon. It's like, oh snap! I do know what I'm talking about. I do know what I'm doing. Just do it.
That
Do it
is such
afraid.
great advice, right? And that's for anything. Like you don't stop being scared. It's like you grow stronger than your fear. Like it's like the fear doesn't go away ever, you know. And something I've shared before and share often is courage is not the absence of fear. It's the determination that there's something more important than your fear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when something becomes bigger than what you're afraid of, you know, and, you know, use the analogy like if your child was in danger, you don't care. You just go. You just do it.
Right.
You're not thinking about fear because it's about something more important than you fear. So when your audience, when your voice, when your message, when your medicine that you know that you have in your soul that needs to, you know, be brought to the world, when that
Mm-hmm.
becomes more important than your fear, you do it afraid, you know?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Monica, I'm excited. And Monica, what are you working on? What do you got if you're still here? I know we froze for a minute and now we're back on. What are you working on? What do you got? And then Monica has a practical question for you. How often would you say someone should release a podcast episode? So we'll respond to that question and see if we can get Monica back in here so we can hold you accountable to what you're bringing to the world.
No problem. You can do it as much or as um, infrequent as you like. If you feel comfortable only releasing once a month, then release once a month. If you get more, more courageous and more bold and be like, you know what, I want to do 2 or 3 a month, or maybe bi-weekly or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
then do that. Laura from the Shelter in Place podcast, when she first started, she basically started as an audio diary at the beginning of the pandemic, and she was putting out episodes every single day. It was just kind of, just word vomit, like, so this is what happened today, and this is what's going on now, and the world is still not open yet, but we're all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not do that. She had the grace to do it back then, and I'm like, girl, you got it. You got it.
Uh-huh.
But now she releases podcasts about once a week, and they're actually looking to change up the frequency of how often they release episodes because the production level is better. There's more production going on,
Mm-hmm.
And the summer is coming, so you want to travel. So you adjust it to your life schedule,
Right.
Just let your people know what's happening, if there are any changes that you want to make, and they'll pretty much roll with the flow.
I love that advice. I think that's super, super practical. Super practical. You do get to set the rhythm. You get to set your life. And I think as you journey forward, everything evolves, right? And
Right.
I think to your point, making sure you communicate to your community what's going on and where things, where things are going. But everything evolves and grows. And even the format that you start with doesn't have to be the format that you continue with. If that was what it needed to be at the time, you can then evolve it into something else, and just create a totally different feel, like Kanye's 808 and Heartbreaks, like a totally
Right.
different direction.
Right.
And not everybody loved it. And he's like, I don't care. Like, this is, but a lot of
It's
people did
actually
love
one of
it.
my favorites
I'm
because
just,
I don't
right.
really know what he's doing right now, but
Yeah, anyway, we'll
I
talk.
don't I don't
Come
speak
on.
on him. I don't speak
Send
on him.
love to Ye.
Yeah, I say nothing. I'm like, look, he's
Yeah,
doing
he's
him.
figuring it
That's all I
out,
got. That's all I
right?
got.
He's figuring it out. That's beautiful. All right. How do we stay connected with you? Um, what do we got going on? Yeah, how do we stay connected with you? And Monica, I'm still looking at you. What are you working on? What is this podcast that's going to be coming out?
It's in there.
What's the idea right now? As Sarai says this, I'm calling you out.
She's working on 2 books plus the small business market, and she wants to do a podcast around business and politics, like how the two can work for each other.
Ooh. Okay, so what do you think about that? Workshop that real time, Sarai.
Oh my. Okay. Um. hmm. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not well versed in the business world.
Mm-hmm.
I've made it my life's journey to never step foot in the corporate world. Never.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just it doesn't fit me. It's too stiff. I'm very much a free spirit. Um, but structure wise, I can speak to that.
That's what I'm saying. What do you think? What are some
I'm
ideas
sorry,
of
I
people
went on a
taking?
tangent. Um, hmm. I would definitely do interview style. Yeah, because you can have some really important conversations with people.
Right. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, I would map out um, what ways you believe they can work with one another. And then if you already have people in mind that you want to reach out to, or do your research on the types of people who either believe what you believe and either some contrasting opinions, have a conversation with them first so you know how to gauge the conversation. Make sure that you know how to direct it, because sometimes people can take over. You don't want that. It's your show.
You still get to steer it. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. That's what I would say, especially for business and politics. I would definitely be aware of the situation. I would definitely have a gauge and be like, all right, this is going a little bit. All right, we're back.
I love that. That's beautiful. Thanks for workshopping that real time, Monica. We're excited for what you create. Thanks for being here today. And Sarai, this is the last thing. How do people get in touch with you? Because you're dope.
Oh, thank you. You can reach me on Instagram at To Sarai with Love. It is a play on Sidney Poitier's movie To Sarai with Love. I love that movie.
Okay.
You can also reach me at Gmail, To Sarai with Love at Gmail. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I am not ever that present on Facebook, so I definitely would not reach out to me there. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're looking forward to May 20th, the drop date, or before. We'll see where this goes. And to all of the rest of the journey, thanks for showing up in this world and bringing your light, your life, your medicine to this show today and to the greater population as you continue to journey forward. Loved having you here today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.
All right. And LinkedIn Live, good to be with you today. Thanks for joining us. You could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here with us. So thank you. Sending so much love and keep changing the world, y'all. I'm